Labour Minister Seamus O'Regan. He joins us now. Minister, good to have you on the program. Thank you for making the time.
Thanks, Fashi.
Viewers, and myself included, were just watching Chris describe what she was looking at there. It was like homes, newer homes, completely and totally leveled and destroyed. I know you have been through that community today. Share with us and with people watching tonight, if you could, a little bit about what you've seen.
Yeah, Port Basques, where I am now, and actually just moments before I got here in front of this camera, I just saw some rangers arriving, or reservists, I should say, arriving into town, driving by. So that's a good sign for people here in the community. I was in neighboring communities like Fox Roost, Marguerite, Burnt Islands, Isle of Mort. What Chris was showing you was, both, I guess, the kind of larger effects. It's the deeply personal effects. It's going through rubble and seeing photographs and old LPs that were, an old Elvis LP that somebody had kept. It's watching neighbors go by and recognizing those effects and taking them up because they know who owns them. And you realize in each of these communities that what you're looking at are people's homes. There's so much rubble that, and because Newfoundland's landscape is kind of pretty hard screwn anyway and rugged. It would take people who live in those communities to remind me, as somebody who doesn't live there, that was a landscape lawn, that there was a fire pit there, that this is where people had perfectly manicured gardens, because it is utter turmoil there now, and it's deeply jarring. It's deeply jarring because it's people's homes, and anybody can relate to that. We were in, I think it was in Fox Roost, and just heading out on a road, and we thought a house was abandoned. It just looked like there was almost nothing left of it. And all of a sudden, this man came to the door. I mean, albeit he probably shouldn't have been in the house for safety reasons anyway, but he was trying to find his cat. And, talking to us, he seemed fairly composed, and then he just broke down. And, when you see a grown man of a certain age just break down in front of you like that, it will take your breath away. It's rough, and that's just been accumulative through the day. I think what's interesting is I covered Igor as a reporter, and I would say that the difference there was, we were looking at culverts that exploded because of the rapid rush of water, and roads that would, explode, and you'd have communities cut off. Here, the damage is to people's homes, to private property, it seems. And people who have lived in, near the ocean, and I mean next to the ocean, for their entire lives, inheriting their parents' or their grandparents' homes or their great-grandfather's stage, store, and wharf in one instance, now no longer want to live near the ocean. Now that's people who are jarred. That's people who are in shock.
Extremely consequential. And just before, as you were speaking initially, I just want to let you know, and our viewers, we were actually showing exactly what you were just saying, drone footage of the destruction of those homes, and you can see some patio chairs left, and maybe if the control room could actually bring back that footage now, just so that because as you were speaking, I was thinking, it's not just the sort of individual damage is done, or the individual level, but the scope of it just overall is enormous. And I know a big part of this discussion is, what recovery entails, what role the federal government plays. I know you mentioned the reservists. There's 150 now throughout three, or heading to 3 provinces. Do you anticipate, based on what you've seen, that there will be a greater need for more, or for other types of federal involvement in that recovery? I know it's early, but just based on what you've seen.
Yeah, it's early. I mean, I think we're still assessing needs. I mean, you have to remember, of course, and sometimes for even those of us who live here, because we're used to flying into Newfoundland all the time, you forget that it's an island. And the arteries and the supply chains here are fairly limited. My first concern with Port Basques, aside from the people who live there, was also my concern about, would the roads to the ferries and cargo ships in Port Basques, on which this island partially relies on, were those roads intact? They were, because that would have had medium long-term effects on supply chains and food security for the entire island of Newfoundland. And those themes seem to be okay. I mean, Marine Atlantic is running, Ocean X and other marine suppliers are running. So that's some good news. But I think the scope of private damage is beyond the physical, and the monetary, but also the emotional, is going to be with us for some time. That, of course, will get a little more complicated. I know that a lot of people will have to deal with insurance companies, et cetera. What we've been able to say to people is, look, we will be there to help fill in those gaps wherever we can. You just want to provide people with that support and let them know that this country stands by them.
And just to reemphasize that, and sort of, again, it's early, I acknowledge that. On the question of insurance, because so much of this involves damage from flooding and so much of that is not covered. I know Minister LeBlanc, your colleague today, mentioned the possibility of some kind of conversation. If that conversation takes place, what do you hope comes of it?
Well, I know that there have been insurance companies have been, putting their heads around for quite some time now. Climate change, soil erosion, as we as we adjust to life in a climate that is changing. What does that mean? What does it mean for communities that live near near water lines, near the ocean, near shoreline? Those are larger kind of fairly fundamental economic issues. And I know what you're talking about here, the individual claims of people. We'll see what form those take. What you're seeing here are people. This isn't. These aren't pleasure communities or vacation communities. These are people. This is their primary residence, and a lot of them don't have a heck of a lot of money. So, these aren't vacation homes. Some of them are quite lovely and nice, but these are owned by people and sometimes inherited in families, and they don't have a heck of a lot of money. So you got to make sure that you look after them. That fundamentally is what we need to do.
Okay, Minister, I'll leave it there on that note. Thanks very much for sharing your perspective and your time this evening with us. Seamus O'Regan, Minister of Labour in Port aux Basques tonight.